If you've taken physics or chemistry, you know how important units are. Confusing pounds and newtons can lead to vastly different results. Well, on September 23rd, 1999, a mistake made by engineers at Lockheed Martin would finally catch up to them and doom a mission that was part of a $328 million program. Reducing this to just a math error would be an oversimplification, and in this video we'll take a look at the many things that caused this error to exist in the first place. To understand how this happened, we must go back in time 7 years. In 1992, NASA launched the Mars Observer. The mission cost over $830 million at the time, nearly $2 billion when adjusted for inflation. It was designed to study the Martian climate and magnetic field, but days before it was supposed to enter Mars's orbit, it suddenly lost communication. It's not entirely clear what caused the spacecraft to be destroyed, but an independent investigation from the Naval Research Laboratory believes the most probable cause was due to a rupture of the fuel pressurization tank in the propulsion system. This caused NASA's leadership to radically change their approach. NASA Administrator Daniel Goldin stood by the mantra, faster, better, cheaper. The goal of this was to have NASA do smaller missions, but launch more frequently. That way, if one mission was a total disaster, it wouldn't be $1 billion down the drain in a split second. The Mars Surveyor program was the first test of this new philosophy. The Mars Global Surveyor, which was launched in 1996, was the program's first successful mission, capturing much of the scientific knowledge the Mars Observer was originally supposed to. Then it was time for the next set of spacecraft under the banner of Mars Surveyor 98, an orbiter and a lander. But the issue was that their development budget for both spacecraft combined was a measly $193 million, with only $43 million for mission operations. This was a fraction of the amount they had before, which led to the program being understaffed, forcing engineers to cut corners and use old designs without rigorously testing them. The Mars Climate Orbiter was designed to finish what the Mars Observer could not, making profiles of the atmosphere and monitoring the climate. It would also serve as a relay for the Mars Polar Lander, allowing the lander to send more data home without needing a massive, power-hungry antenna to reach Earth directly. To fully understand why the spacecraft failed, we must take a look at its physical design. Whenever you send anything into the vacuum of space, it gets bombarded with photons emitted from the sun. These carry momentum, tiny amounts, but over time it adds up. The spacecraft has to do small adjustments to counteract this force, either by spinning a flywheel or using thrusters. The Mars Climate Orbiter had a unique design characteristic. Its solar array was asymmetric, so the pressure from the sunlight was constantly trying to rotate it. Every time the thrusters activated to stop this rotation, they subtly adjusted the trajectory of the orbiter. This happened continuously over its 9.5-month mission to Mars. This is where the unit error comes into play. When the ground computers accounted for these adjustments, the data was logged into a file called small forces. In the specification, NASA explicitly required these be in Newton seconds. The Lockheed Martin engineers responsible for this software were based in Denver, Colorado, quite far away from the NASA team in Pasadena. The engineers at Lockheed Martin wrote the software to calculate these forces in pound force seconds. This value was sent to the output file without being converted to newtons, violating the specification NASA gave them. When the JPL team in Pasadena got the data, they saw the number 1 and interpreted it as 1 newton second, but in reality, it was 1 pound force second. This means the navigation team was underestimating the force applied by a factor of 4.45 for 9.5 months, slowly dooming the orbiter. On September 15th, 1999, 8 days before arrival, they performed Trajectory Correction Maneuver 4 to fine-tune the approach. The navigation model showed that everything was on track, contradicting the raw tracking data which was beginning to look suspicious. 24 hours before arrival, the navigation team looked at the raw Doppler data, which gives a precise measurement of velocity, and saw that the orbiter was predicted to reach a dangerously low altitude. They had the option of performing Trajectory Correction Maneuver 5, but they ultimately decided not to do it. It wasn't because the maneuver was untested, but because the team couldn't agree on what the true orbit was. If the raw data was wrong and they fired the thrusters, they risked pushing the orbiter out into deep space. With immense pressure to get the job done and the root cause of the error still unknown, they decided the risk was too high. On September 23, 1999, everyone gathered in the JPL control room, excited to see the faster, better, cheaper strategy pay off. At 090046 UTC, the main engine started. At 090452 UTC, the signal was lost. This was 49 seconds earlier than originally predicted. 49 seconds might not sound like a lot, but for a spacecraft relying on precise orbital geometry, this is a death sentence. It meant the orbiter was much lower than intended. Contact would never be re-established. Post-accident reconstructions determined that the orbiter dipped as low as 57 kilometers, well below the minimum survivable altitude of 80 kilometers. The large asymmetric solar array acted like an atmospheric brake, catching the thin Martian air and ripping the orbiter apart. It didn't take long to figure out what went wrong. When they audited the small forces data, they saw it was in pound-force seconds, not Newton seconds. When they multiplied the data by 4.45, they saw precisely where the spacecraft went, 57 kilometers high in the atmosphere. While this unit error was the root cause, the first phase of the investigation revealed several other contributing factors, including data errors that went unidentified for almost the entire mission, understaffing, and inadequate training. The second phase ripped management apart and found the faster, better, cheaper strategy to be the true cause of the disaster. So what about the Mars polar lander you brought up earlier? I'm glad you asked. Upon this revelation, everyone was worried the same mistake had occurred on the Mars polar lander. I'm happy to tell you it did not have the same issue. It had a different issue. Its sensors mistook the vibrations of the landing legs deploying for touchdown, causing the engines to cut off 40 meters above the ground, destroying the lander. Both of these spacecraft were lost due to cost cutting. The faster, better, cheaper era was finally over, and NASA adopted a new mantra: mission success first. There was now extreme scrutiny when handling units, and teams were integrated so nothing could be lost in translation. Because of these changes, the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter would launch in 2005, successfully orbit, and finally give us the valuable information about Mars we had been trying to get for over a decade. The Mars Climate Orbiter didn't crash because of stupidity. It was built by some of the smartest people alive. But when you create a bureaucratic nightmare and continuously cut funding to make things cheaper, you almost always end up making it cost more in the long run.